I'd like to take this opportunity to welcome the following gentlemen as they will talk about the Depression. So, you guys just go ahead and talk about the Depression.
Well, we'll start, I suppose, from 1929, when the stock market crashed in New York. And we didn't feel it here till in about 30 or 31.
Yeah,
and you remember that, Chet?
Yeah. That's when the banks started closing?
Yes.
We had 3 banks in Glencoe, and the first one that closed was the People's State Bank, which was the best bank in the end financially. And then the Bank of Glencoe closed, and then First National Bank closed for a while, and then the depositors come in and help them out, so they kept the bank open, but they wouldn't make any loans of any kind.
Yeah. And of course, truthfully, didn't, the Farmers Bank shouldn't have closed.
No, it shouldn't.
It was a little
shape of any.
Yeah, it was a little skullduggery on the management in there. And then, of course, we went into this drought.
Yeah, that was bad.
And that really put the frosting on the cake.
And then the government started in with their programs. The people are so hard up and losing their homes and losing their farms, and they could start a WPA, and then the Minnesota.
Well, they even had this debt moratorium that time for a couple of years.
Oh yeah.
My dad was on that committee, and he worked pretty near every night.
And then they started the rural credits to help the farmers out, which helped them out
The
quite a
Federal
lot.
Land Bank really stepped in. I remember that though, the prices, that was quite a deal. I remember one year we went to hogs, and the price was way down to 2.5 cents, something like that.
Yeah.
And we had these hogs, and we were holding them, waiting for it. We were playing the market, you know. So finally, they got up to 280 pounds, somewhere in there, and we finally got a truck from Dover, was in the yard up here, sent the truck out. We had to pay the trucker on the place before he took the hogs out. That's how little we got for the
I
hogs.
sold 180 hogs to Dover for $2.60 a hundred. I sold a farmer, I think it was around 1,000 bushel of corn for 12 cents a bushel. And I sold them 2,000 bushel of oats for 10 cents a bushel. And we didn't get enough off the farm one year, 250 acres, to pay the taxes.
Well, we were in the shock thrashing crew that time, 8 of us neighbors. I remember that year when the drought really hit us. We started the machine at 12 o'clock noon, and we rushed the cooks for supper at 6 o'clock. And ordinarily, we always had around 3.5 days of shock thrashing. So that was how dry it was.
How it reflected on the individual farmers and workmen, was, at the time I was in Sioux City, Iowa, and just a little thing to relate this part of it. We had a farmer bring his eggs. They were really cheap.
About 10 cents a dozen.
Something like that. But the tragic thing was, this man had built a house on his farm, a new house, and he paid cash for it. And at the time of this happening there, he decided to build a barn, and it was nearly finished. And he said to this contractor, I would pay you now. Oh, he says, take your time. Well, he says, I got the money in the bank. Just how much money was involved, I don't know. It was fairly reasonable. But the contractor said, wait till it's all finished. And in the meantime, this bank closed up.
Oh boy.
Well, the poor farmer, he came, with eggs, and he says, well, I'm losing everything because I haven't got to pay for this building. And so the only thing that I really recall, my own, I was landscaping at the time at the big estate, 25-acre estate. And I remember pork shanks, they were 5 cents a pound, and
They threw the squeal in.
and gasoline a gallon was 6 cents, common gas.
Oh man. That time I just bought in the station with Fred Kershaw.
Kershaw, yeah.
And our accounts, you know, we had accounts, farm accounts. And when that moratorium come in, then they told us what they would settle for. They'd say, what do you want, 50 cents on a dollar, or do you take 25 cents a dollar? And nobody had anything, so you had to. Yeah. So you took what you got, and that was, I tell you, when they talk about being rough now, there's nothing rough now compared to those days.
I was mayor at that time for the city of Glencoe, and I want to tell you some real rough stories, sad stories. The first Christmas I was mayor, good people around town, we got baskets for 32 destitute families. And I got some of these relief guys, and we butchered 8 big at the farm, and I cut it into 32 quarters, and we delivered that around town. And I never saw so many tears and laughter in my life from the children and the old people. And one widow on the west end of town, and we delivered there. She was living in a brooder house with 4 children, and they hadn't had nothing to eat but popcorn and dried bread for 6 weeks before that. And of course, a lot of the men we put on WPA to dig sewers past the middle school there. It took them over a year to dig that couple blocks in there. That's 32 foot deep. And on the WPA.
Then there was a bunch of them
by the middle school on the north side of the middle school. There's 3 men deep. There's 1 man at the bottom, and they'd shovel up to the next, and then shovel up to the next, and then up on top. And they had to put up boards, of course, all the way up.
Then a bunch of them. Park, you know, that park was all a big sand pit there, wasn't it? And they leveled that all out. This WPA.
Well, we had to find work for them, and they could work about 3 days a week and get about $2 a day, so they'd have a few dollars, and then the government shipped in a bunch of useless stuff, you might say, for them people. They shipped in a whole big truckload of grapefruit, and them older people would come around with a big sack, 25-pound sack of grapefruit, and sell it to you for a quarter or 50 cents so they could buy some coffee or sugar or flour or something. That's how hungry the people were.
The WPA that time, that's how the trees got out to Oak Leaf Park.
I know.
We had our farm had a lot of elm trees, and they were a lot of smaller ones. Wasn't 6 inches in diameter or something like that. Wasn't the WPA guys, excuse me, went out, and this was in winter. They came out to our farm, chopped those trees out, loaded them on a flat top, hauled them down and dug holes in the frost and planted those trees, and most of them grew.
Well, we had to find work for them for something or other, or else the government wouldn't give you the money, that's all.
And then we had that terrible snow that one winter, and they took a bunch of them and went ahead of the snowplow
and shoveled,
25 feet of snow some places.
Oh, I had a lot of people come to the city clerk's office and beg for food or anything, or work of any kind. I tell you, young people nowadays, I hope they never have to go through something like that.
That's right.
And then, of course, with that depression, the big drought came.
Yeah, that's right.
You remember how the fellas were hauling these cattle up north around 18 and in there?
Remember how they were shooting the little pigs and throwing them under?
And out west in Renville County, the sheriff went around shooting the cattle. There was nothing for them to eat.
Well, I went out west to buy cattle in western South Dakota, and it was so bad out there, a cow sometimes would have to walk 25 miles to water, and by the time she'd get there, she'd die on the way. And when they'd go through with a big herd of sheep, there'd be just a string of dead sheep. You could just follow the whole herd over the prairie.
This sounds kind of fantastic, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does, but
it does. You wouldn't think it was true. You would think that they have a bunch of liars on here, but that's the very truth.
Well, I had this one thing I want to say. I was in the town of Dupree, South Dakota, that's western near the Black Hills. And a big rancher there. I went into a restaurant and sat down and had a meal, and he stood there watching me. And when I got up, I had 2 slices of bread left on the table. And when I got up, he sat down quick and grabbed them 2 slices of bread and ate them. And the restaurant guy come and wanted to kick him out, and I said, "What for?" paid for the bread. Well, he says he got no business eating it. And I said, well, give him a meal and I'll pay for it. And years after that, I'd go out there and I bought his cattle every year.
Yeah, here.
A man by the name of Henderson.
Oh, yeah.
Wasn't there one pleasant thing that came out of the thing was our hospital started in that area?
Oh, yeah.
We
Yeah.
started the hospital and then we put that
WPA
addition
work?
down.
Yeah, WPA.
So we should.
There was a lot of good things came out of it
Yes.
because there were a lot of people learned.
Well, that was the
There is-
first part of the hospital we put under WPA, but the second one, the city built for $80,000.
Yeah,
And then I was on the board of directors when we built the last
the
one.
third part, yeah.
Well, there was a lot of things come out of it. People began to found out that there's a maker that controls things
Yeah,
more than
that's it.
human.
Well, if you take it though, if you think back, we still learned something out of that.
Oh, God, did we?
Disciplined us for later in life to accept things when they did go a little
When it
wrong.
was
We were
tough, yeah.
broke in better and could understand.
Yeah, you could accept them.
Yeah.
You didn't break.
As
You
such,
didn't.
yeah.
You didn't
Take a
fall
look, that's when you
apart.
had a few dollars, like
Yeah.
we'd go and ask, years ago, we'd ask our dad for $1 on Saturday and he'd probably give you a quarter or 50 cents. Nowadays, the young folks have it pretty nice, you know, they'll get a 5 or 10 or 15 to go and take the
First,
girl out.
first nowadays you almost have to have it.
That's
Yeah.
right, because it has inflated.
You aren't in.
You-
And this
You
is
haven't got
another,
You know, that time you'd go up the street and if you'd collect $100 on your bills, you'd almost have to get a reward for it. You couldn't get a darn dime out of nobody.
yeah, those are the tough days.
Yeah, those were the days when you put it into what we started with the farmers, what was the name of that? The Farmers Bank.
The People's Bank.
People Bank,
People's
yeah.
State Bank.
We started in there, we put money in there, closed. We took it to the Bank of Glencoe, put it in there, closed. And of course then we ended up in the First National. But every time you carried it over, you lost some.
Oh, yeah.
What made me mad was that time we sent a check to the petroleum department. It laid there for 2 weeks.
You got stuck.
We got stuck. I wrote the Attorney General that time about it. And, well, he says if you had it in a different account besides your own account, then it would have been all right.
Well, Mel Keenan out here, I hauled in over 100 head of steers for him. And and they didn't cash any of the checks.
Ouch.
And it was putting here $7,000. And he said, I went down to the Bank of Glencoe, and he said, I had a hunch there was something wrong. But at 3:30, he says, I deposit them checks. And at 4 o'clock, the bank closed. And he called me up. He must have heard at 7 o'clock the next morning. And he told me, he says, my God, Herb, he says, I've cashed some checks. And he says, the bank is closed. Well, I said, I'll tell you, well, let's fool them. We'll call up the commission firm and stop payment on the checks. So I called up the commission firm in South St. Paul and stopped payment on the checks. And we jumped in the car and the checks most generally come through around 11 o'clock in the morning, and we were in there by 8:30, 9 o'clock.
yeah.
And a little while after we got in, the check come through and we stopped payment and they give them a new check and saved it.
Oh, that was darn lucky, wasn't it?
How could Mel be that
Was
lucky?
he tickled?
I'll bet
He
you.
never thought of stop payment on it.
Yeah.
And I said, well, let's go and stop payment on
Yeah.
it. And he says, can we do that? And I said, sure. And he come on the car right away, didn't stop for breakfast.
There.
Yeah,
That's
it's,
quite a deal when you think of it.
Well, then in 1936, she gradually
Started coming out.
coming back
Yeah.
somewhat when Roosevelt took
Roosevelt
over.
got in and promised us chicken in every pot in the car in every garage.
Yeah.
That's the time the government started
Yeah.
blowing money.
That's when we started on this
Never quit.
spending. Never quit.
See,
Got
Still
work.
at it today yet.
We didn't get the chicken in every pot and
It was kind of a tough one.
and a car in every garage. There's 3 cars in every garage now. One standing back to the house for standby.
$300-400 billion in debt doing it too.
Yeah.
Well,
Well, we shouldn't talk too much politics.
No, that's a
uh,
thing.
but
We might get into an argument.
Yeah.
there's only one thing I hope that we don't get heavier inflationary than
Yeah.
what we have, because I lived through inflation in my day.
I don't think, Paul, there's no way you can stop it.
You don't think
It's,
so?
Well,
if
they
they
had-
can hold it down to a certain
They had
degree.
times like this, I know my granddad used to tell about it in Cleveland's time, when the money got so tight. You couldn't, you couldn't go to town and get any cash whatsoever. You took your produce in and
Yeah.
traded it. And then all at once something, what was it, they shot Cleveland or something, and then things started to loosen up and they got over it.
Of course, years ago, you know, these people that came here, you know, that was more of a barter system than money
Oh, yeah.
system, wasn't it?
Well, my grandfather come with, he bought the farm up here in 1864.
Yeah.
We've had it 110 years.
Yeah.
And when they wanted flour, they had to go horseback and put a sack in front of them and a sack in back of the saddle and go to Hastings. That's the closest place where they could get wheat ground. And then go down
My
there and get
grandparents
it.
went to Carver,
Yeah.
that's where they got their,
Well, they had, and they had to go away to Hastings down the mill down
At
there.
that time, yes.
Well,
Yeah.
well, boys, we're getting way back,
Yeah,
back
yeah,
of our
yeah.
time, I
talking about
guess.
depression.
And yeah, no, it's-
Well, the depression, them years too.
oh,
yeah.
that was
It hasn't
depression,
been,
I tell you. They were depressed. Well, what gets me is that some of these young people don't realize that some of these people had a depressed life almost all their,
Well, Otto, they aren't in position to realize it. I mean, they haven't had the experience.
no, that's
I
true.
think they're thinking in their way.
Yeah.
I have got a lot of confidence in young people that way.
Oh, yeah.
But
Oh,
when they haven't experienced, like we did, well, we experienced things that our grandparents never had either.
Oh, yeah.
That's the process of, what do you call it, evolution?
Sure, you have to go along with times. You can't be sitting back in the
No.
18th
Well,
century.
I tell you, I heard this time the Leopold trial,
Oh,
that big
yeah.
trial lawyer, he was out in Glencoe on that other
Mhm.
trial here that time, and they were eating dinner, him and a young lawyer, and another young fellow in the Mission restaurant. I was standing there, and I heard this big lawyer tell these other fellas, he says, "Don't make your living with your hands, make it from your shoulders up." And I think that's what the young people are doing today.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, the education.
They're further advanced than we ever were in school and.
That's right.
and
Yeah.
everything.
Education
Just
has,
look at the opportunities
Yeah,
they've
that's
got
what
right
they
in
got.
this
But,
school here.
I never forgot that. I always try to use a little of this up
Yeah.
there too, you know, with your
Yeah,
hands.
of course, sometimes you have to dig in a little from below.
Oh,
see,
yeah.
you know, with your eye.
well,
I say, use both of them.
Yeah, use both of them usefully.
a segment of the population has to dig in order to
Yeah,
thing go.
yeah, you have to work. You can't just think that on a revolution of $1 you're gonna live. You gotta work, you gotta put your time in at most everything you do.
And you gotta like what you do. That's the main
Yeah.
thing. If you can pick out something you like to do,
Yeah,
why, then you're satisfied with
and
your
never,
work.
and never push any of your kids into something that they
They don't
want.
like.
Yeah, because they'll never make a success of it.
That's when this old story got started back in those years. This lady from California came to visit Minnesota, and she says, she says, it's terrible out there. She says, we've got depression, and then we got hard times with it. That's that old joke. That's when that began.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Oh, there was a lot of things came out of that. But I tell you, in those days, right after that depression and that drought, you could hire a good man because he was hungry and so willing to work that he wanted to work. We couldn't get a job.
We hired real good men for $10 a month,
Yeah.
board and room and wash.
Yeah.
I was clerk of the school district that time. We paid the teachers $33 a month,
Oh, yeah.
and they had to pay their room and board out of that, $8 a week.
I know my sister, Mrs. McKenzie, who taught school out here in the Galen district, and she rode horseback back and forth to school, and she got $30 a month.
That was those were, of course, those are olden days, boys. We never want to go back to them.
No. Well, you can't.
No.
Because of this inflationary movement, you
Oh,
see.
no.
Somebody has
We
to
never
take care
want to
of
go
this.
back to that.
No, no, really.
Never.
I say one thing, you know, traveling across the seas here, our standard of living is the highest, and it's still the best country
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, no doubt.
We grumble about everything. Isn't right, that isn't right, the politics isn't right, but we have the best country in the world.
You compare...
Don't you think that's human nature?
Oh, yeah, that's sure, that's human nature.
Yeah.
You read in the statistics how the taxes, how much higher they are in the foreign countries even yet than they are here.
Yeah.
It's
Well,
fantastic.
the most reasonable country to live in yet is the communist eastern part of Germany. But who wants to live there?
No.
Yeah.
You can't get out or hardly get in.
Yeah, and you can't tell,
You're just a number there.
Yeah.
You have
That's
no
right.
individuality
No.
whatsoever.
and you
No
can't,
incentive
No.
for anyone. so
no,
you
and you
can't-
can't talk as freely as we can here.
Well, don't you think the Depression's over with?
Oh,
Yeah.
I think so.
What's the...
Yeah. Some of that,
Well, all at once, the depression is over.
depression, and so we're gonna
Tommy's
start-
gonna cut
The
it.
only thing we hope and wish is that we don't have another one,
Yeah,
a recession. We don't need it. We can't.
Oh, Tommy's gonna finish up for us.
Yeah, I'm sure this will go on for a long time, stories and stuff. But we're running out of time, so
Yeah.
thank you very much for coming.
Oh,
thank you.
It's real good.
we should thank you for having us up here.
That's right.
Yeah. Beautiful.
To listen to all this breeze.